All right, this section that we're going to take a look at today is the area of decolonization. Essentially, what we're going to look at are countries around the world that were either under imperial control or colonized control of European and American countries. Okay, we are going to look at today India and Cambodia as our main two. The India one you guys should be familiar with since the video we saw. Of course, we have Mohandas Gandhi is originally going to start out his campaign for Indian equality in South Africa. He's successful in gaining equal rights for Indian Hindus and Muslims in South Africa. And then he returns back to India where he begins his efforts through Satyagraha and Ahimsa, which again, remember, both of these are the base concepts of civil disobedience, which he'll later write that book in English. His efforts were finally rewarded. India will be granted independence in 1947. Unfortunately, he was assassinated, Gandhi that is, by Hindu extremists in 1948, which unfortunately again led to the end of the efforts to reunify Pakistan and India. Pakistan, of course, remember, is going to break off, and it's going to be led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, pictured here on the right. And it broke off where we actually had two Islamic states for a little while. You had in the west what was called at the time Western Pakistan, and in the east, Eastern Pakistan. Now, eventually, we'll see that Eastern Pakistan will break away and form its own country because it was neglected by the West. Now, the big problem, which again you may recall from the movie, was the mass displacement of approximately 12 million people were ousted from their homes. Hindus living in Pakistan were in most cases forcibly removed and kicked out of the country, and vice versa. We had a lot of Muslims in India that were also kicked out, which this led to roughly about 12 million people. Again, rioting actually ended up happening in the transition. And again, there's no exact estimates of how many ended up dead, but it puts it somewhere between 500,000 to 1.5 million people were killed in rioting as a result of the change of intercourse between India and Pakistan. Finally, like I said, we get the creation of Bangladesh. Essentially, what happens, like I said, you had Eastern and Western Pakistan, and Eastern Pakistan felt that it was being looked down upon and regarded as a secondary Muslim state. Eventually, what happened was there was a civil war in 1971, and it was finally agreed that because of the cultural differences as well, that Eastern Pakistan would then become the country of Bangladesh. And after the war, both countries still have fairly decent relationships with one another. But again, there's still a lot of animosity between Pakistan, Bangladesh towards India. Again, the Hindu Muslim aspect is still very heightened and very tense even to this point today, especially since the country of Pakistan and India both have nuclear weapons. Now, one of the big things that we had, though, that took place in India is, again, steps toward gender equality became much, much more likely. And we've seen some really positive steps in taking place in these areas. India elected its first female prime minister, which is Indira Gandhi in 1966. She is actually the daughter of Nehru, who was the very first prime minister, and is not related to Gandhi. Again, Gandhi is actually kind of like a fairly popular name like Smith in India. Pakistan even elected its very first female prime minister in 1988, which is Benazir Bhutto. Okay, so both of these regions have actually taken some steps at really kind of modernizing in the sense that allowing women to actually become leaders in what, of course, has typically been a very patriarchal society. Now, as we jump over and we look at Cambodia, we had what was called the Khmer Rouge, which was led by Pol Pot, a communist organization that overthrew the right wing government. Pol introduced the Cultural Revolution, very similar to Mao, but we had massive killings that took place in Cambodia. This literally earned the nickname called the Killing Fields, where you can see here in the video or excuse me, in the picture, roughly like dead center, you can see piles of bones, okay, littered all over the place. Vietnam invaded the country in 1977 and helped to restore some stability because Pol Pot was just considered a massively crazy dictator. They withdrew in 1989, and finally in 1991, the UN monitored free elections, which actually placed their prince, Prince Sihanouk, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. They put him on the throne in the form of a constitutional monarchy, which is what Cambodia still has to this day, a constitutional monarchy.